Welcome back to Refit and Sale. My name's Georges of the Solent Boat Butler. This is a Contessa 32 from the mid-70s. This is Project Lottie, and this is the next episode, which I'm going to call Bits and Bobs, because sometimes in a project there aren't any big jobs you need to do. There's just lots of small little jobs. So in this episode, we're going to be doing bits and some bobs as well. So what bits and bobs are we going to be doing? Well, I have just fitted some new structure underneath these seats in the main cabin, and I've got some nice new bunk boards. They need varnishing, so I'm going to drill some holes so we can stick our finger in and lift those boards up and then give them a varnish around in the workshop. That's the first thing I'm going to do because I'm waiting for some flow coat to dry, which I've just done on the boat here. I want to paint in all of these lockers kind of behind me and behind the camera, and I can't do that until I have drilled the holes for the new cap shroud U-bolts that are going to be fitted in the knee. So that's going to happen. I've got, when I was looking on deck at where the U-bolt's going to go for the forward and aft lowers, I then found out that the stanchion bases that are just in here, right next to the aft lower U-bolt, or at least where the U-bolt will fit, they are all wobbly, so I'm going to remove those and refit them on some nice big backing plates probably as well, which is going to be fun because they're all glassed in underneath, because what they did when they built these boats was they would have the deck come out of the mould, they'd flip the boat upside down, or flip the deck upside down, fit all the deck gear, glass over all the nuts and bolts so that they wouldn't leak, and then they would fit the deck onto the boat, which is a fantastic idea because it does stop all the leaks, because the sealants weren't so good back in the 1970s as they are now. The downside is eventually you do need to take those things off, and unfortunately that means a bit of grinding and a bit of swearing normally to get the item off so that you can then fix a leak and refit it. So that's going to happen, and I'm sure there's lots of other things along the way. But the first thing I'm going to do, I think, because the flow coat there is wet, is I'm going to take all these new boards off to the workshop and give them their first coat of varnish. As I said a minute ago, these new bunk boards here need finger holes in them because at the moment there's no way of easily getting them out. So I've marked on the boards where I want some holes. The bigger ones are getting 2 holes, the smaller ones are just getting 1 hole, and I'm doing it in where I think is a convenient place to be able to lift up a cushion and just stick your finger in and pull the boards out. So I'm going to stick a little pilot drill through first, because I know that the drill in the centre of my hole saw is a little bit blunt. So because I haven't sharpened that for a while, I'm going to pilot drill and then go through with a hole saw. I always like drilling both ways when you're doing something like that, because it saves you from having all that breakout of the wood. So I go through kind of 80% of the way in one direction and then come back through the other direction, just finish it off. That just needs a little sand and we're all good. Right, I've got about 10 more to do, so I won't video them all, I'm just going to crack on. Welcome to the slightly untidy workshop. This is the clean room, theoretically, in my workshop, where I try to have a clean area for doing exactly this sort of job, which is varnishing and painting and what have you. Because I'm just putting the first few coats on before a final coat gets put on these, I'm not overly worried if there's a bit of dust in the atmosphere. I've got a bit of dust on my clothes because I've been sanding back on the boat, but I'm not too worried at the moment about that. When it comes to the final coat, I'll make sure that I'm either wearing a nice clean new coverall, or I'm wearing nice clean clothes that aren't going to shed any dust on the work that I'm going to do. Just thought I'd talk about varnishing for a minute. We're obviously going to be varnishing the bare wood here, the bare plywood, so there's going to be some initial prep. I'm going to give these a quick sand out in the dirty part of the workshop with some 240 with the grain, always sanding with the grain and the edges, just to kind of smooth off and take off any kind of final bits of dirt and what have you on the surfaces here. And now, because it is bare wood, it's generally recommended that you thin the first few coats of varnish that you put onto a surface, because it helps it soak into the wood slightly and you get better adhesion. I'm ultimately going to be finishing these pieces in a satin or rubbed effect varnish. I'm going to be using this stuff, Ep18's rubbed effect. It's a single component varnish. But to build up some film thickness, before I apply that, I'm actually going to be applying a gloss varnish in the first instance, probably for the first 2 coats, and then I'll put 2 coats of the rubbed effect on just to finish it off. You've got to remember, these are internal boards. They are underneath the seats. They do not need to be absolutely perfect. What we're trying to do is make them aesthetically look quite nice, but also seal them from moisture ingress so that they stay looking nice and will last many, many years to come. So first job, let's go and take these outside. I'm going to give them a quick sand over with some 240 and then I will be back. That's everything sanded, and I've given it kind of a bit of a dust down outside to get rid of the worst of the dust. But before we can do any varnishing on these, they need a proper clean. So what I'm going to do is just give them a wipe down with some rag, tissue and some white spirit, and you'll suddenly see the colour that the wood will become. It's a really nice light brown that this will end up. I'm just going to wipe down. Ideally, you can feel which way the grain of the wood runs as you run the cloth over it, and that will pick up all of the dust. So it might be that I need to do this twice to get rid of it all, and that will evaporate. And then, whoops, get a clean bit of tissue, and we'll go over all of these, removing as much dust as possible. Now, what you might be thinking is what I was just thinking, and that's, how am I going to lay out all of these large pieces of plywood so that I can varnish them all at the same time. Now, I do a thing which I kind of call layering, and I start with the smallest pieces like these, which is why I had them on the desk, and I'll varnish them first. So this might sit on a couple of cups. If I grab another one, I can do that, and then I'll get a couple of bigger cups potentially, and then I can rest that on top of there. And if I've got enough supporting tubs of paint or whatever, I can layer lots and lots of pieces of plywood on top of one another, and I can stack 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 or more pieces of plywood all on the bench at the same time. So that's the plan. I'm going to carry on cleaning. Just been playing a fun game of Tetris. If you don't know what Tetris is, then you're either much older than me or much younger than me. It was a very big deal back in the 90s if you had a Game Boy. But anyway, I've worked out where I'm going to put everything so that I can layer all my pieces of wood. So I've got that sitting on these bottles, and then that's sitting on cups, that's sitting on a couple of china mugs, and that's sitting on some pots of filler of some sort. And then I've got one which is out of shot on top of a inverter charger. So we're all good. I can varnish everything and then I can leave it to go. Now, the important thing is that, having wiped this down with some white spirits, or if you're American, I think you call it mineral spirits, you need to let this completely flash off. It needs to completely evaporate, because if you don't, the solvent will get trapped in the wood and it will make your varnish take a very, very long time to cure, because the solvents in this will slowly be percolating through that varnish that you want to dry. So I'm going to leave this for 10 or 15 minutes just to make sure all the solvents have evaporated off the surface. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to get my varnish out and get my rollers out and everything. So I'm going to apply this with a roller on here. It's going to be the easiest and quickest way. I'm going to use a short nap roller, so it gives you a pretty fine finish. So I've just stuck my roller on my little roller handle. Now, if you've seen my channel before where I've been painting, you'll know what I'm about to do. I get some masking tape, and with the sticky side out, I wrap it around the hand and then rub my roller against my hand, because this removes all the little bits of fluff and lint and whatever that will end up in your varnish if you don't do this process. And it's really, really, really frustrating when things fall in your varnish. Now, it probably doesn't really matter at this sort of stage because there's dust in the air, there's dust on my clothes, and it's going to end up in the varnish. But it's good practice to clean your roller before you go and do any painting or varnishing. Right, now I need to put that somewhere clean, like that. Here's my varnish. I have put about 30% white spirit in there, so this is a very, very liquid varnish that I'm going to be applying. So cheers. I'm slightly bored of waiting for this to completely dry off in terms of all the solvents coming out of the wood. It's about 90% there, so I think I'm just going to crack on and do it. There's so much solvent in this, hopefully there won't be too much solvent entrapment, but ideally you would wait for this to be absolutely, completely 100% dry, but I'm going to risk it in this case. And I'm going to start on the ones that are the driest, and then fortunately the ones that are still the wettest are the last two big ones that I'm going to do at the end. So I'll set up a time lapse and you can watch me varnish, or you can go and make a cup of tea and come back in a few minutes. And there we go, that's the first coat of varnish on one side of all the boards. You can see they're kind of layered under there, standing on various cups and things. So I'm going to head back to the boatyard and carry on with another job. I'm back on the boat now, and the next job I want to do in this bits and bobs video is to lay up some glass over the top of that repair there. So if you see there used to be a hole. This is the knee that supports the cap shroud, and there's a bar that goes through it, which is attached to the cap shroud U-bolt. The new cap shroud U-bolt has much longer legs, so the bar that goes through the knee is much lower down, which is a better design than the original one. But what I want to do is lay up some glass over that repair back there to just make sure it is as good as it needs to be. There's the area on the starboard side that's just been ground back all around that little repair. When I ground the other side, I did find a couple of little voids because I filled it from one side with masking tape on the other. So I ended up having to do a little bit more filling on the other side, which I've now cleaned up. So the next job is to do some little patches of glass to go over that. Because it's difficult to get to, I'm just going to lay up the glass on a bit of plastic here. There's some little patches of glass there, so I'm just going to fully wet those out, and then I'm going to lift them up and then stick them in position, which is just up there and on the other side as well. There you go. Now you can see it. Slightly hard to see because it's kind of translucent, but the glass is in place now. There's a little patch with 2 layers of chop strand mat over the top of that repair. So was that strictly necessary? Well, I actually do think it was, because I just filled that with kind of thickened resin with chopped glass in it, but just to stabilize the kind of the structure a little bit, to stabilize the surface, having a layer of CSM over that just seems to be the right thing to do. So that can now cure, and then tomorrow I might come in and drill some holes for the new cap shroud U-bolts. Now I know it probably doesn't look like it, but I've just been having a bit of a tidy up in here because I had tools and equipment out absolutely everywhere, and I wanted to mop up the water that was in the bilge because I haven't emptied the bilge for quite some time, about probably 4 or 5 months. the boat has been sitting here and it has collected a little bit of rainwater over that time, so I'll just mop that out. But that was actually a pleasure because it's a really nice, perfectly clean bilge, apart from a bit of water, so that's all good. My next job, I think, is to do a bit of sanding. So I want to paint inside all these upper and mid-level kind of lockers. And the glasswork that I did in here yesterday is all cured. It feels very slightly tacky because it was a laminating polyester resin that I've used on there, so it's got a slightly tacky surface. So I'm going to go over that first with a bit of acetone, because otherwise it's just going to clog up my sandpaper. And then I'm going to finish off the sanding in here. The owner did come down last year and did some sanding on the boat, which was really helpful because it saves me doing it. So a lot of this has been done in the main, but there's just little bits that I want to go over and just do again, or some little bits that he missed in corners and what have you. So I want to do all of that sanding, and then I can come in and start doing some painting, as well as doing the upper lockers. Actually, I'm going to do this lower part here as well, the bit I'm sitting on, so it would be nice to get that done. I want to get the floor done, to be honest with you, which is to put the hardwood strips down on the floor to finish that, but to some extent I'm holding off because I want to do as much dirty work in the boat before getting on with that, because as soon as I've got that nice teak and holly effect floor down, I'm going to be covering it up and wanting to protect it, and I don't want to be moving large bits of kind of equipment in and out, or bits of wood and what have you, just to try and protect it as much as possible once it's in. So, so I'm going to do some more dirty work today. I'm not going to show you the sanding because no one needs to see sanding on the internet. I know some people like seeing lots of sanding, but I don't get it. It's not that much fun. But I thought you might be interested to know what sort of sanding setup I use to try and control dust, and what I find works well in my day job. So I sometimes do joke with people that I'm a professional sander and I occasionally fix boats, because unfortunately in this line of work there is an awful lot of sanding to do, whether it's prep for doing laminating, or whether it's sanding bottoms, or sanding in lockers, or sanding rudders, or you name it. There's a lot of sanding involved, so that's just the way of things. My preferred sander that I go to for most of the jobs that I do, if they are flat areas, is my Mirka sander. Not sponsored by them by any way, shape or form. This is my Mirka Deros sander. It has a 125mm pad on here, but I can swap that out for a 150mm pad. What do I use it? Well, it's pretty light and it's pretty powerful. It has multiple speed settings that you can control with the little switch here. You've got a plus and minus here, but you can also control it. This is the on and off button here, and actually if you put it halfway down you only go half speed. If you go fully down you get full speed, and what's nice is you can hold that in the palm of your hand, and it's really nice. It sits in your hand nicely, it's not too heavy, and the vibrations on it are quite manageable as well, because some sanders can be really quite hard. If you're doing hours and hours of sanding, it can make your hands all kind of fizzy and tingly, but this thing is pretty good. The other reason I particularly like this is that it has very good dust extraction. So I can connect up my vacuum to this. This is the hose I use. It's got a special Mirka one that just plugs straight into there. This is a big long hose. It's either connected directly to my vacuum cleaner, or it is connected to a thing called a dust commander, which is then in turn connected to the vacuum cleaner, which saves me from using lots and lots of vac bags. But with the use of a vacuum, you get, I'm not going to say it's completely dustless sanding, but virtually dustless sanding. It really does work very, very well indeed. When it comes to sanding, of course, you can't do it without some sort of sanding disc, sanding media, and I use these Mirka sanding pads, Mirka Abranet they're called, there's the box, and they are mesh based sanding media. If you look up close, I can wave through it, you can see my face probably, that's probably a better picture. These are part of the kind of key to having good dust extraction, because the dust that you're creating gets sucked through the pad. It's not having to go through like 6 or 8 little holes, straight through the pad, straight through the sander and up into the vacuum. There are many manufacturers now that make these sanding mesh sanding discs I just happen to continue to use Mirka because I'm used to how they work. I'm sure the others that are on the market are just as good. I just haven't tried them. If there's any manufacturers out there that want to send me some trial sanding discs, I'll be very happy to give them a go and give you a review. But for now, I will continue using these chaps from Mirka. Right, that's enough talking. I need to get on and do some work and earn some money. Hello folks, I am just in the edit for this video and I wanted to just take a second out of your time to remind you that there is a link in the description below where you can send a donation to the Refit and Sale channel. Any money received gets spent on useful things like this very expensive microphone so you can hear me properly. I'd like to buy some better lighting. I'd really like to buy a better camera. If you have donated already, thank you very much. You are absolute superstars. I don't mind what people donate. I don't mind if it's £5, $10, 15 yen, 20 euros. Some people are very generous and donate more than that. Thank you very much. You are extra superstars. If you send something through, it really does help the channel. And now I'll let you carry on watching the progress on Lottie. Well, just to add to the fun, I've been sanding inside these lockers, and if you look up in that corner there, I've just found some more kind of detached secondary bonding. I don't know if you can see that without putting my hand in the way, but that stuff has come detached. So whilst this bit of bonding here isn't super critical, that bit there is bonding in this bulkhead and it's kind of tying it into the underside of the deck there. The bulkhead to hull is more critical than the bulkhead to the deck, but I can't really ignore it, so I'm going to have to get in here with my little belt sander and just grind that out and lay up some fresh glass in there. So we won't be doing any painting in here today, but I'd rather find it now than find it later once everything's kind of painted and then find that there's a problem. So c'est la vie, this is Old Boats for you. There we go, a little bit of grinding later and I've got dust all over my nose, and I should have been wearing a mask, but I can't get in here holding a mask, but there we go. I've ground back to the wood there. This laminate here is all fine between the bulkhead and the side of the boat. It was just this bit up here that had pulled away, so I'm going to give that a wipe down with acetone, cut up some glass and get that all laid up so that it's done and it can cure, and then maybe I can come back a bit later and finish all the sanding and prep in this locker. Incidentally, I have absolutely no idea what this blue paint is that is on here. It clogs the sanding discs up like crazy. It's an absolute pain up the backside to clean off. I can paint over it. It's not going to be a major issue, but it's just horrible. It's almost like it's been painted with like household emulsion that you put on walls or something. I don't know. Hopefully it isn't that, but never mind. Probably hard to see, but I have put in 4 layers of the combi mat that I use and then an additional layer of CSM over the top. So that just now needs to cure, and then this can be sanded and painted again. Slowly getting there. Sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward and 1 step back doing these old boats, but as you go through it, you just have to fix things as you find them and carry on. Now, I did say that this was a video of bits and bobs, and I've got fed up of sanding, so I started doing some work outside. So I've been filling some little bits of damage on the upstand that the tow rail will go onto, and whilst that is now curing, I can't put any gel coat on until that has been sanded back and prepped. So I'm now looking at the stanchion bases. So up behind me, I'll turn the camera around so you can see in a minute, but up behind me there's like a bulge where there is a glassed in something. I suspect there is a piece of brass or something like that that was bonded into the boat, into the deck when it was built, and that has been drilled and tapped for the fixings for the stanchion bases. Now, unfortunately, those tapped holes are not really working very well. They keep coming loose. I suspect the threads are knackered on them. So my plan is to cut out that bulge and then put a nice big backing piece of pre-made laminate in there and then just through bolt it, but I'll show you what it looks like. So that is the bulge I'm talking about. You see that kind of triangle shape there. I've just cut the top off of the kind of internal furniture there, which will be hidden once the headlining goes back up, because access was very, very tight. And I'm going to get my little oscillating saw in there and start hacking away at that to see if I can find a metal plate under there that I can then remove and replace with something a bit more substantial. Well, with some difficulty, I've removed that lump of laminate, which I was expecting to contain a piece of brass or something similar, or at least some other fixings in there. And it was just a lump of laminate, which is unusual. I wasn't expecting that at all. So I'm wondering if those screws are literally threads cut into the laminate, possibly. I'm going to run a drill through from the top. But I'll show you in a minute what it looks like. And I've left with a completely flat deck under there with a few voids and bits and pieces which I can fill. There we go, that's what it looks like with the lump of material removed. There's a few little voids, but it is just kind of solid laminate. So, so there we go. Every day's a school day. Back in the workshop, these have had a coat of very thin varnish on both sides. These are the under bunk boards, if you recall, that I gave their first coat to a little bit earlier. Now these are, if you can hear that, ever so slightly rough, because the first coat of varnish always tends to kind of lift the grain ever so slightly. Now I could leave that and put a second coat on and then give it a sand, but I'm going to give it a very, very light sand this time, because these have had a couple of days to dry. It's going to be very easy to sand. Now all I'm going to do, this is a piece of used 240, so this is definitely not 240 anymore. It's probably closer to 350, 400 grit, and all I'm going to do is literally rub it over the surface that much, and that's just taken all the roughness away. You might even be able to hear it with my hand. So that's smooth, that's rough. I don't know if you can tell the difference in the sound, but I can tell it with my fingertips. So I'm going to take these out of the clean room, give them a quick wipe down with some sandpaper, or it's actually sanding disc mesh stuff from Mirka, and then give them a very quick wipe down and then give them another coat of varnish. I'm not going to record the varnishing because frankly there is only so much internet, so I will just crack on, but I just thought I'd give you that little tip. It's going to get a very light sand now, and then it will probably get another slight sand after the second coat, third coat, and then the fourth coat will be the final one, because 4 coats is plenty for some bunk boards that are never going to get seen until you lift up the cushions. In terms of going forward from here, it's going to get a second coat of varnish. It's going to be a second coat of the gloss varnish. This first coat was 30%-ish white spirit, or mineral spirits if you're an American, and the second coat will probably be about 10% thinned. The third coat will be almost as it is, you know, just thinned to make it roll out nicely. And then the fourth coat, I'm going to go from the gloss to the satin finish, because that's the finish we're going to go for on these, and most of the boat will be in that kind of satin or rubbed effect finish. So I'm not going to show you the varnishing, but I thought that would be a useful little addition. I'm just doing a bit more work on this stanchion base repair up here. I wasn't sure how the fixings were held in place. At one stage I assumed that there was a plate that had been laid up in the deck when the boat was built. Then I couldn't see that, so I wondered if the deck had just been tapped for the screws, which seems unlikely, but I just couldn't see anything in there. So I decided to drill through from the top, and it turns out there were indeed some nuts in there that were very well buried in the laminate up here. So I actually ended up drilling through one of those, and then the 2 others span, but they span themselves out through the bottom of the deck, leaving a slightly bigger hole than ideal, but that isn't a problem because I'm going to be putting a backing plate on here, and I'm going to fill those holes and then re-drill them, so it's going to be all good. So the backing plate that I'm putting on there is a piece of laid up fiberglass sheet left over from doing the water tank on this boat. So I'll go and grab that now so you can see it. So I've got this laid up sheet of probably about 8mm glass fibre. It's actually epoxy rather than polyester resin that was used for this, but it makes no odds for a backing pad, so that is absolutely fine. So I'm just going to cut out a triangle that is slightly larger than the base of the stanchion base, and then I can put that on. And I'm going to do exactly this same process on the other side, because that stanchion over there is a bit loose as well, and it's obviously been coming loose over a period of time. I suspect the fixings that were in the deck weren't fully fixed, if that makes sense. So the nuts were possibly slowly working loose over a period of time. So it's much better, I think, to have fixings that are visible and on show, so that they can be tightened up easily, and you can also see if there are any leaks coming through those holes or fixings. So that's what I'm going to go to. I'm not very keen on hidden fixings buried in laminate. So I'm going to cut out a backing pad. I'm going to squidge a load of goo up in those holes, and then I can let that set, and then the stanchion base can be refitted. And there we go, that's the backing piece of laminate that I've glued up with some polyester filler. It's a kind of a semi-structural polyester filler with glass strands in it that will bond those two together, and then once that's all set up, I'll be able to re-drill the hole and then through bolt this. It's nice to have a big backing pad on these things. It just saves the deck from flexing and the gel coat from cracking up on deck. So you need something on the back of a stanchion base just to stop that movement, but I think that will do the job very nicely. Well, I have now done both sides of the stanchion bases that I showed you earlier. This side has been done exactly the same time. I cut off that kind of lump of glass layup, which contained a couple of nuts in there. That's all been bogged up, all the holes have been filled, put a piece of glass in there, and that is just finishing up curing, and I'll be able to re-drill and then fit that stanchion base back on. But I'm going to do some gel repairs up there as well before that stanchion base goes on that side. And I started the gel repairs on that side, which I'll probably talk about at some point in this video. But because it's raining, I started to do a bit of sanding in here, and most of it was sanded in all of these kind of lockers in here and behind me and on the other side. But I just needed to get in the corners and then give it a really good clean, so everything's been wiped down with white spirit. And I'm going to come in and do some painting. So I'm going to get the first coat on all of these lockers. I am going to be painting it with this stuff, which is Hempel Bilge and Locker paint. It's pretty good stuff. I've been using it for a few years. It covers a multitude of sins, dirt, grime, what have you. Hopefully there's not too much dirt in there, because I have given it all a really good clean as best I can, but it does cover nicely, and hopefully 2 coats, sometimes 3 coats, and you have a nice hard wearing clean white finish, also available in other colours I expect. But we're going white in all the lockers on this boat. So I'm going to set up a camera. I'm not sure how many people want to watch painting, but I will maybe do a time lapse and you can see painting. Is that interesting? I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Do you want to see painting? I'm going to be rolling it on. I'm going to be using a brush to get into all the corners. I need to do a little bit of masking up just on some of the edges where the paint is going to be butting up to the varnish work. Yeah, enjoy. here is that first coat of white Belgian lacquer paint. Covered everything in nicely. It actually covered better than I was expecting. It's a little bit patchy as you'd expect, but it's not as patchy as I thought it was going to be. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm thinking we might get away with just 2 coats. 3 would be my normal go-to, but we'll see how it goes. That's the other side now. The LED lights are making it all a bit flickery for some reason, but you can see inside the lockers, all clean, all white, lovely jubbly. So I am over in my workshop here. Behind me is varnishing that I've got on the go. So these are bunk boards. They need a second coat on the opposite side of them, under there. See, that's not very shiny. That's nice and shiny. So they need a second coat, and then that can harden, then they can get a flat down, and then another coat of varnish. I'm going to finish them eventually with a rubbed effect or satin finish varnish. So I'm going to flip all those over, mix up some more varnish, and by mix up I mean pour some out, thin it slightly, so it will roll out nicely, and get cracking. Hello folks, I am just in the edit for this particular video and I have realised I've got way too much content for just one Bits and Bobs episode. So I'm going to make 2 episodes and I'm going to bring this episode to an end here. In the next episode you are going to see me continue with doing Bits and Bobs on the boat. As you'd expect for a Bits and Bobs episode, there's going to be some shiny new things going in, like those cap shroud U-bolts and the lower U-bolts. I'm going to be doing some gel coat repairs, some little grinding out and filling, and then regelling of some work outside, and a number of other things which I can't remember right now because I don't script these things and I just kind of film stuff as I go along. If you want to support the show, there is a link down in the description below. You might have to press more or you might have to press expand. I can't remember what it says. One of these days I will look it up. There's a link to a PayPal account, and any donations that I receive from there are genuinely really appreciated. Anyone who donates, thank you very much. You are superstars. It allows me to buy things like this very expensive microphone. I want to get some better lighting. I really would like to buy a better camera because at the moment I'm using an old iPhone, which does the job, but it would be nice to have a proper camera with like a zoom lens and stuff. So that's the ultimate plan. So I will see you on the next episode, which will probably be out the following weekend if I can get my arse in gear and do all the editing in time. And thanks for watching. There's a like and a subscribe down below. I think as a YouTubeist you're supposed to say like and subscribe many times. So like and subscribe, and see you next time. Bye for now.